Hello there, and welcome to episode 2 of Delightful Dissent. In this episode, we're going to be talking about whether new business is the best way to grow. And I'd like to welcome my guest, Remeny Armitage. Hello.
Hello. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you, and thank you very much. So, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be discussing an assumption. And the reason that I like doing this is because I find that there are a lot of beliefs out there. There are a lot of things that are really holding people back. And there are people doing really, really interesting work to challenge those and improve those and help this get better. And Remeny is one of those people, as are all of my guests. In doing that, I want to give you personally some insight and something that you might be able to use in your own life. But I also want to give you an experience of doing this kind of work and challenging this kind of work, because I'd like everyone to be able to do this as part of their work. And I'd like the people that are really, who've got real strength in this area to do it as the main part of their work. It's not always considered valuable. In fact, it's often considered kind of disruptive and a problem. So I really want to reclaim this space and do this in a positive way. And that positive way is exactly why this is called Delightful Dissent. It's about challenging assumptions, but it's about doing so in a way that opens up possibility, that leaves things better than they started. It's destruction, it's conceptual destruction, but it's creative destruction. It opens up the possibility for us to believe and act better afterwards. So this is a conversation, and it's a conversation not just between Remeny and I, but it's also a conversation with you. I'd be please do engage with the content as we speak. Ask yourself questions and engage with us directly. If you're watching live, you can comment, and there'll be a chance for us to talk about the comments towards the end of the show. If you're engaging afterwards, please do leave a comment on the video, and what we'll do is I will certainly be available to answer the questions, and hopefully if there's anything that I can't answer, I will pass it on to Remeny as well. So we'll be able to continue that conversation whenever you come across this content. So yeah, today, as I say, my guest is Remeny, and I first met Remeny a few years ago through the Happy Startup School, if I remember rightly. Probably at summer camp, and yeah, we had some really interesting conversations. And at that point, I didn't know really what I was doing in quite this way, and I thought it was a really interesting area that Remeny was exploring, but I didn't really see the connections with what I was doing. Kind of coming from, I come from this more technical background, and Remeny comes from the kind of much more human background, and it's interesting we've kind of converged on a similar space, which for me is always really exciting. So yeah, what I'd really like you to do, if I could ask you, Remeny, is to describe yourself a little bit and a little bit about what you do, please.
Oh, well, thank you. That's great. So, well, I turn clients into advocates, and that's what I say. My background is marketing and business development, so I've had nearly 20 years working in the traditional world of trying to get business for people, mainly in the agency space. But the area that I became more and more passionate about and interested in is the actual relationships within businesses that exist with existing clients or past clients, because I always felt that there was an opportunity there to nurture and build on those relationships. Because when I did new business, I was always looking at how to build the relationships in a very human way. So when I went off and did things on my own about 3 years ago, I decided, I went out there saying, I do the marketing and I do the client relationships, I do business development. And then I became more and more focused on my message, which is nurture and build relationships with what you've already got and your clients. And if you can intentionally look at how you can convert and build your clients into advocates, you can only improve the way you do your business and your relationship with your clients, so that they stay with you and love you and recommend you.
So how is it that you actually help people do that on a slightly more practical level?
There's two things I do. Typically, I will interview my clients or customers and find out what's working and what's not, and get their feedback to find out how to improve as the business. It's quite a difficult thing for businesses to do themselves, because often there might be issues within a business, and if the client is noticing these problems. It might be a person, it might be a process, it could be any number of things. It's quite hard for them, unless it's really bad, for them to feed that back. And so quietly they'll be looking for another supplier. And so I find out what the problems are and what the benefits are. And I find out who the advocate clients are, who the at-risk clients are, and who potentially the disengaged clients, and look at and listen to what they're saying, and listen to what their ideas for how their supplier can do better and service them better and understand them better. And then I put together a report saying, this is what they're saying, and this is how you can develop what you're doing. The thing I find so exciting and interesting about doing it is every single project I work with, every single one of my clients, there's always really, really clear themes that come out of those interviews from their clients. It's usually about 3. And I always find it fascinating that they're all so different, but every client has the same complaints or same comments from their clients, good or bad.
That's great. Thank you. So what I'd like you to do is maybe you could share a quote with us that really kind of, helps, that resonates for you around this space.
Well, it's a good question. I did prepare this one. My quote is, conversations with customers will increase sales even if the product or service is never mentioned. That's by George Farris of Farris Marketing. And I think it's a really nice way of explaining the importance of nurturing those relationships in a very human, direct way with your customers, and actually showing you care and just talking to them as human beings and as potential friends. You can build the trust within your business and your relationship with your clients, nurture that. And if you're not focused on selling all the time, you're not focused on that side of it, your clients will hopefully trust you, like you, want to work with you because they like you as people. And then you'll have a better chance of building more business from them and hopefully getting more business from their friends and colleagues, etc. So for me, it sums up what I do rather nicely.
That's great. And I think it's really interesting for me that it is in this kind of marketing space, and it is doing a practical thing. It's not, I think there's, when I hear the word marketing, it doesn't necessarily mean that to me, or it's certainly not what I've seen in the past. So I think it's a really refreshing perspective to think about it, because certainly for me, exploring marketing and sales it can feel very inauthentic, and it can feel very unpleasant, almost like a chore that we have to do and something. And a lot of that for me is about, it's like, because I'm making myself do it, and I'm kind of trying to make other people do something they don't really want to do, and trying to, feels like tricking people into doing something, or and that's not a positive way to start the kind of business relationship that I want to have.
It's interesting you say that, because as I said, my background is marketing, and so everything I do now, ultimately, I've always got a marketing and a business development head on. I can't help it. I have been in the dark side, but actually what I do, and a lot of the interviews I do for my clients, is around marketing and understanding where their clients are, what marketing they engage with, and looking for opportunities within that, and also plotting and understanding who your ideal customers are from talking to your customers, and then finding out why they bought from you or what they love about you. I've got a client I'm working with at the moment, and that's their main, that they are brilliant, really well-respected agency. I haven't had a negative comment from their clients yet. But what's so lovely about them is that they want to understand how they differentiate themselves from their competitors, which is coming out of that just by keywords that their clients are saying, and it's going to help them with their positioning. But it's also giving them ideas for how they can improve what they do off the back of what their clients want and are hearing, and the fact that they're even listening to their clients differentiates them. So
it's one of those very difficult things I find, and a lot of my clients as well, is that it's actually very hard to understand your own value in that sense, because it is just what you do.
Yes.
And you do it so easily and so naturally that you kind of can very easily take it for granted, and you kind of can often lead to focusing on the things that you find harder and are actually of lower value to the people that you work with, and instead allowing yourself to express that, that true value is a really, really powerful way of serving your current clients and finding new ones.
Yes, and it's I think it's so easy for people to go for the quick wins, or they think they're the quick wins, but actually that can be a much bigger slog. And I think if you're making assumptions of what your customers want or your clients want, that's fine, but actually you might not be right. And so often because I do help people with their marketing as well, when I'm doing that, I will always say, well, what do your customers say? What do they want? And actually what message are they giving you? And actually, when you listen to what they say, you can get a very alternative view to what you should be providing. Or I had one client who, really well respected agency. I did 2 bouts of their interviews, and the first section they had, say, problems with their communication and processes, and they fixed that. And the next time I did their interviews, their clients wanted them to be more strategic, and so they put in a new strategic arm, a whole new service, and within a year they were making 40% profit just because they were actually listening to their clients and servicing them that much better. And so, the power of talking to your clients and not making assumptions is really valuable.
I think that's really great, and it does lead us to the assumption that we really want to challenge today, which is new business is the best way to grow. Could you tell me a little bit about what led you to want to challenge this today? What got you here?
Well, I worked for agencies for 18 years, and I did mainly new business and marketing. And for me, I was very much about trying to offer something of value to the potential clients. And I'd often have to go in cold, and I did a good job of nurturing relationships, but it was, it takes quite a long time. It's a lot of time, money, and effort to turn a cold lead into a real opportunity. And I've got a great stat here, which is, it's according to Marketing Matrix, the probability of selling to an existing customer is 60 to 70%, whereas the probability of selling to a new prospect is 5 to 20%. So in other words, if you constantly go for new business, the amount of time it takes, I used to say to my boss, this might take 2 years to get that client. Could be worth it, but what about looking at our old clients? We've got a list of 300. Let's start nurturing those relationships back, because they know us and they trust us already, or they did. Surely that's going to be easier than focusing on the new. But because everyone thinks they need new business and do marketing to new people, these people sometimes forget the importance of what they've already got. And I think the problem as well is the traditional world of business. People focus on their existing clients, the now clients that they're working on the project, but then they forget about nurturing the relationships once that project is finished, and they're then focusing just on the new stuff, and that bringing that new work in can take such a long time and so much effort. And so when I was, back to your question, when I decided to set up on my own, I was like, well, let's focus on what people already have and look at how to build business off the back of your existing contacts. I know personally that's definitely the best way for me to be building businesses, by speaking to people I already know, and surely that's a better start than all new.
Definitely. And I think there's something really interesting. What's kind of coming out for me in this is there's a lot around how we work and how we make decisions, and for me, we kind of assume that we're always making these rational decisions, and really they're often felt. They're just kind of intuition, and we kind of do them. And it can be very difficult, first of all, to know ahead of time whether it's going to work. But what we can do afterwards is kind of join the dots and look forward. And I think that quality in finding our clients and finding out the people who we really successfully served is what's common to them. How can we do more of that? I think that's a really, really valuable thing, and something that we forget. We kind of think, okay, right, they're done, we're done, we can't serve them anymore, so we're kind of move on now. And instead, thinking about those people, really, I think about it in terms of the community around your business as much as the the kind of audience that you're just transactional with is a really, it's fundamentally different way of thinking about things.
I think it's interesting when the transactional. I think one of the things I'm very passionate about focusing on and getting my clients to focus on is less of the transaction and more of the relationship. So try to make your relationship led, as opposed to I want business from you. And actually, how can you turn the relationship more into a partnership as opposed to a supplier relationship? And then, I'm still friends with clients of mine from 20 years ago because they trusted me, and I nurtured that relationship, and I liked them and they liked me, and then they worked with me over many years in different agencies and businesses I've worked with, and I'm still in touch with them. And for me, that's not because I was trying to sell to them. I can be very blunt. I was sometimes very blunt with them about what they needed and how I felt that they should do it, because I always wanted to make sure that they were getting the best out of my business. And so it's having that honesty that you can build on and actually grow according to those relationships. And then people recommend you. And I think it's important to remember that people are people, and actually you should be looking at how to nurture relationships so that people like you. And not everyone's going to like you. You shouldn't be trying to market to everyone. You should be focusing on who your ideal clients are, who loves you and why do they love you, and then try and replicate that. And that's when the marketing and new business comes in, because once you know that, don't make assumptions about what that looks like. Talk to your clients. What do they think about you and why? And then move on, and then start to try to get out there. And it might be your clients can recommend you or work with you to do marketing with you more than just a testimonial, but you might be able to do an event with them, for example.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. So one of the things that comes out for me is obviously that kind of, when you're in this kind of community and this relation situation, their success is your success and vice versa. So you have this kind of mutually beneficial relationship, and it's not kind of trying to squeeze as much out of that relationship, out of that one transaction as possible. Instead, it's about how can we build this over time so that we both benefit over time. And that's a very, again, that for me, I think that challenges some of the foundational assumptions of how a lot of business is done at the moment. I think it's if we think about the idea of really trying to just get all of the profit out of this one transaction, it really does harm that relationship. There's no scope in there for anything to develop further along. And just like you say, I think there's also another thing. If we're confident in our expertise, our organization's ability to deliver something of value, then we can accept something of value back from other people. Instead of having to be this kind of ultimate authority in this whole space. And because we often actually end up working with clients who are more like us than aren't like us, because we have similar problems. We're working on similar problems. We have a similar worldview. And when we have to be the ultimate authority in that space, we have to know everything already. We can't really do that. We can't really move that forward, and we kind of have to have this fixed idea of things that's perfect. And that when people challenge it, when people have different opinions, it can be a very, very difficult thing for us to accept.
Yes, but I mean, equally, the challenging bit, I think, is one of the keys to nurturing and building good relationships. Because I think the old adage, the client is always right. I would disagree with that as a challenge. That should be another one. But in as much as I don't think the client is always right, the client doesn't necessarily know that. I don't know what the clients might want or whatever it might be. And I think it's really important to have the courage within what you do to challenge your clients and to question them and make sure that their decisions are right. Because actually, if you do have the guts to challenge them, they will respect you more. And if they don't, and you might not be right, it's your opinion, but I think it's really important to have that ability in relationship, which is more about partnership than just the transactional side. And just saying the client's always right, I've got to make more money out of them. Actually, no, that's not right.
It takes you away from doing the stuff that really matters to you in some ways, actually. And I think I've seen this in some. It seems to be there as an implicit assumption in quite a lot of marketing. And it's really interesting that what we're talking about here is by listening to your clients, you actually learn more about you and your organization as well. And you can express that better rather than, because if the client is always right and you just chase that, first of all, you have no ability to deliver expertise, really. You're just delivering something that makes something existing easier without challenging anything, without really fundamentally changing anything. Second of all, you don't have that ability to shift things to your, to express that ability that you have and refine that. And that ability to express is a really important thing for us to feel satisfied with the work that we do.
Yeah.
And I think what came out for me really in that idea of respect, and there's a respect in kind of respecting other people's opinion. There's also respecting other people enough to challenge them. And I think that's a really interesting thing. We actually have to value someone to make it worthwhile to tell someone that they're doing something wrong, because it could cause conflict, and we don't need to do that. We can just walk away. So there's got to be, there's when someone does give you feedback, there's actually some, even if it's not feedback that you can use or that is entirely grounded in something really useful, it's still an act it's still a generous act.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, that's what all the clients that I interview are doing. They're giving their time to give me feedback that I can then feed back. And when I'm doing it, I do it as an external consultant so that anything people say can be confidential. And because sometimes they do say things that can be would be very harsh and brutal to someone's face if it was them. So they can say it to me with ease and honesty, but sometimes it's even harsher than that. And they don't want to be assigned whatever it is that they've said. But I can then still feed that back. Quite difficult for me sometimes, but it's because very often what it is it might be the owner of the business or the manager of the project might be strangling something or making things difficult, or they don't like a tone or something, and you can't say that. And so I think they're giving their time to feedback so that they get better service, but equally so that they can improve it for everyone. And I think it is generous of them to do that, but obviously it's in their benefit too. And I think the feedback I get from doing it from the clients that I'm interviewing is that the fact that the client is my client is taking the time to do this it shows they care. And I think it's just that feeling of care and kind of love in a way is really important. And I think something that people should remember, that they need to just have that human relationship conversation with their clients, with someone as kind of who isn't going to be offended by anything they say. I sometimes find myself, I feel like I'm a marriage counsellor for businesses sometimes. But yeah, it is, and it is really interesting. I mean, and equally the types of people, when I interview people who might be, say, the advocates of the business, you think, well, they're never going to say anything bad. And it's not that they say things bad, but they're saying it with love for their supplier. Well, actually, if they did this, that would be really cool. That'd be really exciting and helpful. And so they're always looking to help them improve. And then those people who are at risk, they're the kind of really valuable conversations I have, because they can then feed back and say, well, actually, their communication is rubbish, or the way they do processes with, onboarding, whatever, really needs to be improved. And then it gives the tools to the business to then improve the back end, which is truly, really, really valuable.
And I think there's also, for me, there's a really interesting question in there around understanding that when we get the most value out of the relationships that we do have, we don't necessarily need to seek this huge amount of more of them of lower quality. So there's something really interesting there for me, that idea of like some of the people who are on the edge, who aren't satisfied. It's not so much that we want to adapt to what they're saying. It's actually that we want to ask ourselves, well, why did we attract them in the first place? Because that was a mistake for both of us. That wasn't a relationship that really served either party, and it's not a direction we want to go in. I think there's something really interesting in that's two sides of the same kind of thing, really.
Yeah, and it's kind of facing the fact that actually some of your clients might not be the right clients for you, and think that's an interesting point, and I think it's kind of being brave enough to say, right, okay, actually they shouldn't be, let's fire them. Because also they might be making their clients, their business miserable. So actually, it's important to recognize that and not flog a dead horse just because they're bringing in money. And ultimately, when you care about your clients, you should be caring about your staff. And if your staff are totally stressed because they're dealing with a difficult client, should you be working with them? If all your clients are saying the same thing, then you've got issues.
Yeah, one or two clients at the in that edge situation though is a different thing, and I think it's always, for me, one of the interesting things is there's another one of the assumptions from marketing is really that you're trying to convince people to buy from you, and it got an awful lot easier for me when I understood that I wasn't trying to convince people to buy from me. I was trying to help people to come to a decision about whether they would like to work with me or not. And that I wasn't trying to influence that decision one way or the other. I was just trying to give them everything that they could do to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very different perspective. And it became much easier for me when I understood that.
Yes. No, I think you're right. It's that idea of actually not being too salesy. I can't bear it when I had to do kind of new business. I worked for 6 weeks for an agency who wanted me to be like used car salesman, and I was like, no, I just can't do it. I'm not prepared to do a hard sale. It feels dirty, and some people suit that. I don't. I'm more about the relationship. And one of the businesses I worked in, there was someone came in kind of quite senior, and she was complaining to the boss that I was just chatting on the phone all the time. And of course I was building relationships, but she was very much kind of like, well, things have got to be like this, and you've got to try and sell this, and get the meetings in like that, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, I'm building relationships. They might not be ready for us yet, but when they are, they will come to us. And they did, and because it was built on trust and mutual respect. And, I liked them and they liked me. And that's kind of how it worked. I think trust is a very important one as well. And I think, building trust with your clients and nurturing that trust is absolutely critical. And if you break that trust, I think there's a saying, mistrust doubles the cost of business. And actually, I think that's absolutely right. If you don't lose it, then it's going to cost a lot more to actually rebuild that trust.
It's one of those things where to get trust the first time is actually, is one thing, and it's hard work, but to regain trust that's been lost is even harder.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I think that's one of the really big challenges. And there's something for me is that, there's something really interesting in your work around the feel of the business, as well as the kind of technicalities of what it does in very practical terms. And I think it's really important that those two things line up. And I think one of the things I really value in your work is that it kind of does align those things, because the qualitative stuff matters. The feel of stuff really matters in this. And if we're doing more transformational work, it's actually the core space where we're really delivering what we do as well. So, if we are being kind of very transactional, it's okay. That's fine. If that's our space, that works. I would suggest that place is always a place of diminishing returns, and always a place of a kind of race to the bottom, and instead moving towards that space of growth, and growth for you, growth for your clients, which is about change and is about engaging, is a much more powerful way to operate in general.
Yeah, it is. And I think it takes longer, but I think it brings more value in the end.
It takes longer in the short run.
Yes.
For me, I think that's one of the really interesting things. But instead of being kind of linear, you get this bit of reward for the effort, and then you put a bit more effort and you get a bit more reward. It kind of becomes this exponential thing because you've got all the growth coming in from all around. And so yeah, it starts off very slow, but then it takes off and it becomes this kind of, it's that rapid ascent. It gets faster the more you do it, and more powerful the more you do it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's something that if people, I think time is the biggest problem within probably every business, and finding time to do things, and whether or not it's finding time for marketing or finding time to nurture clients. But I think actually the best marketing you can do is with your clients and nurturing those relationships, because they will hopefully become your best marketing asset. So, and actually you mentioned earlier the idea of, a new product or a new service that you might be having to make assumptions that that's the thing actually is a mistake, because how do you know? You need to speak to your clients, to the people who would buy from you, and find out and test it out on them. And then you can then start to serve them the way they need or want to be served.
And I think there's something really important there as well in bridging the gap between what you know, and it's really difficult because you do have this kind of burden of knowledge. It's very difficult to put ourselves in the position of not knowing what we now know. But for many of us, particularly those of us who deliver expertise or in some degree, our clients don't entirely know what we know, and that's what makes us valuable. So we have to be able to put ourselves in a position of their not knowing, and that you get by talking to them and understanding the language that they use and the way that they frame the situation that they're in, the problems that they're having. I find, rather than being able to say, well, this is how I see it, and so this is how you should see it. It doesn't quite work like that.
No, and then that's where that challenge piece comes in as well. And it's either taking the time to really understand and get to the core of it, but then also giving the client the space to potentially challenge their thinking and pulling more out of them and things. So, and I think, again, a lot of what I do opens conversations for my clients to their clients, and it gets a depth of, there's nothing like having a feedback of what your clients have said, and then you can have an excuse to pick the phone up and say, oh, thank you so much, that was really useful. Actually, I'd like to talk to you about this. What, can you tell me more about this? What can we do better? Or how could I serve you better? Or whatever it might be. And, it does, again, you asked me earlier how I got to this point. When I first started out, I was talking about doing client care, and that idea of keeping our clients happy, which is absolutely critical. But the more I did it, and the more the feedback came through, and the more common themes I started getting from my clients, I was realizing that client care sounded too nice. It was a nice to have, but actually, with the intention of client advocacy, it's really obvious that actually, if you really are trying to improve, by trying to turn your clients into advocates, they will come back for more. They will be your best marketing asset. Your bottom line will improve, and you can only do better. And I think it's all about being intentional and listening to how you can service your clients better, and understanding, especially at the moment, their challenges or their opportunities to change, because we're in a weird world at the moment, and we need to understand what's happening and what's going on in their lives and their future and their clients' lives and future, and how can you help service them so that they can service their clients better. I think it's another thing to consider, getting to the bottom of when you're talking to your clients.
I think that idea, when we can feel the current situation is a cause for panic and a cause for concern, and it can make us very narrow and short-termist. And I think, that being able to know that there's a way to do something else that is more sustainable, that is actually going to give you growth for the long term, but can also, is going to give you results pretty quickly as well. I think is a really important thing for people to know. A lot of us who run businesses are concerned at the moment. It's a difficult time for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
So if someone is in that situation, is feeling, okay, I'm willing to give this a bit of a go, just try it out, how might they start to do that? What would be a good place for people to start in this space?
Well, there's two things that I would recommend. One of them is to look at your client journey and where are your key points of interaction, and what does that look like? And so, from proposal stage through to winning the project, and through to kind of learning to find out more about them, all the way through the whole life cycle, plot that out, and then consider those key points and think, okay, where could I improve bits of that? How can I nurture those relationships potentially better? And then think about what you could do to engage with your clients at the right time that will give them a feeling of care from you. I think, the three things that come up again and again when I interview my clients are lack of communication, lack of proactivity, and lack of processes. They're the three most common complaints. And I think if you plot your journey out and you look at each spot, could you improve the processes? Could you improve the communication? Could you be more proactive and come up with more ideas? So that's one thing. That's kind of a bigger level planning project that you could do. And then another thing to do is think about those. I mean, if you're looking at that journey, think about the times that you could engage with them just as a human and speak to them, find out what their challenges are, what they're thinking, what their opportunities are, without sounding salesy. Just do it in a way of coming from the right place, from care. I mean, that's when sometimes it's easier having someone outside doing it, because otherwise it can sound salesy and people are very afraid of being pushy. And so I think if you can try to speak to them, to say, look, we've come up with this plan that we're trying to help all our clients with. If you can't pay for it now, then maybe later on, coming up with ways of being flexible, but just engage with your clients with a coffee. It doesn't have to be anything set, but it's just being human with them and nurturing those relationships, so that contact people you might not have spoken to for 6 months or a year, and just make sure you put a process in. That's what I'm saying. Put a process in so that you actually have a plan of when you should be engaging with your clients on a regular basis, because that's all about relationships.
So really building in some intentional time to have these non-directed conversations, these exploratory conversations where you're just talking to people as they are.
Yeah. See how the work you've done, how's that panning out? Is there anything there that could have been done better, or could we help you with anything else, etc., etc. So yeah.
I think that's a really strong idea, and it's a very flexible idea, because you really only need to do, you could, when you get started, you could maybe put one of those a week in, or one of those a month. Just try it, rather than saying, okay, we have to shift this whole thing in one go, and move towards probably a fairly different posture for most businesses than they currently have towards their clients.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I find, by doing that and putting those processes into place and thinking about it, it makes people just feel appreciated, and not. I think the key thing is trying not to sound salesy, and actually just it's come from a place of care and humanity. And I mean, I think, as I said, the communication processes and proactivity, people will start to notice. If you're doing those three things, you will start to improve what you're doing. And proactivity, I think, is a really important one.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, it's a fairly well-worn word, but I don't think it's a well-understood word necessarily.
Well, I think what I mean by that, I mean, the communication proactivity bit are tied in very closely. So when I talk about communication, it's picking up the phone and, following up with an email if someone hasn't replied. I mean, basic stuff. I think I'm making myself sound really old. The younger generation tend to be more afraid of the phone than I am. And actually, it's okay to actually start to communicate better and follow things up. On the proactivity bit, obviously that's tied into that, but I think it's looking at your clients and thinking, well, I know we could improve what they're doing by doing X, or it's coming up with ways of thinking about, especially if you're working within an area, a sector, it makes it easier, because then you can say, okay, well, within that sector we can offer this, and come up with some ideas of how our clients could benefit from whether or not it's a service or benefit, understand their businesses so that you can then help them achieve what they need to be achieving. So it's even just understanding their needs better and making the time to understand their needs, and especially at the moment because needs are changing. So it's proactively reaching out to your clients to say, either we've got these ideas, we've looked at your case and this is what we think we could do for you, or that you could be thinking about, maybe nothing to do with us or whatever it might be, but just thinking proactively, forward thinking for your clients.
Because one of the things I think, to go back to the original assumption behind new business is that the perfect client is out there somewhere, if only I can find them, and I have to sort through, kiss these thousands of frogs before I find my Prince Charming client and the perfect client. Whereas I'm not sure that really ever exists. I just don't think that exists for most businesses and most people. That's just not a thing. And instead, it feels like this is a question of, to some degree, helping your clients become better clients for you, and for them as well, obviously. But what does it mean to, if you think about your ideal client, how can you support your existing clients in becoming more like that? If you wish your clients had more money, how can you help them make more money? Because they can't buy your stuff. So how do you help them do that?
Yes.
And so I think there's something really interesting in that space, rather than thinking that we're always looking for this external, idealized, new, perfect client, and never finding them.
Yes. Well, it's interesting as well. What you were saying was making me think that one of the things I've not done yet, but I think is an interesting area, is interviewing the supplier about the clients. And so it's flipping it completely. And so that actually, to create the ideal client, the client probably needs to know what they need to be doing, but then that's up to you to be communicating that and putting those rules in so that they do behave, as want for a better word, in the way you want them to, and actually that they respect you and that they understand, you are meeting their expectations because you've set those expectations. And
that clear,
is really important.
Clearly establishing those expectations in both sides, I think, is a really important practice. And I think for me, often when people talk about writing contracts or writing agreements, they're like, well, this is what keeps me safe. These are the boundaries, and this is all hard and fast, and it's exactly down to that. For me, the real value in them is just that they align our expectations. We always come to things with subtly different expectations about it. We don't know entirely what someone else is thinking about the situation until we talk to them. We only have our perspective. And I think that work to align expectations is a really, really powerful thing to do.
And it's working in partnership with them again. It's away from the transactional and more about the relationship partner, because I think that's the key to a good relationship, is actually you're equals. You want the same thing. You want good business. Like you said, how can you give your clients the tools to make more money so they can pay you more? It's kind of, it needs to go together. And it's the same as like when I was doing marketing and new business, that has to work together. I don't understand businesses where they've got a marketing team and a business development team. They need to understand each other. And equally, the client relationships, they need to be working together with that marketing piece, because it all feeds in together. It should be holistic, but it very often isn't.
No, it's like, it's being part of an ecosystem, isn't it? Being an active part of a positive contributor to the overall business ecosystem that you exist in, rather than just taking from it, being a kind of parasite.
And of course, your client is the most important part of your business. Without your client, you haven't got a business. So they need to be part of your ecosystem.
Yes.
And they need to work with you. And that's when the bit that when I come in and I interview clients, I'm finding that out so that they can then feed into the ecosystem. And then, I mean, an important part of what I do is also feeding that back to the clients. So what I like to do in the my ideal client, I'll do that interview piece, I'll do the report, and then after that, I'll continue to speak to their clients, maybe different clients, but then within a year, I'm speaking to the same clients again, so that my clients are accountable to their clients, and their clients know that things have changed. And obviously then the lovely piece is when someone has changed, when a business has changed what they're doing off the back of their clients' suggestions. Everyone likes that. Tell the client. And the client is really happy and feels
Thank
really
the client for their contribution to the process. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's really rewarding when that happens.
So it feels to me like a lot of this is really about conversation and how we can have good conversations with our clients. And I think one of the big challenges for me is that we're so often told that we don't really have conversations with our clients. It's very much a one-way thing, and that almost that our clients won't respect us if we ask them, if we don't know. We have to know everything in this space, and we have to tell them everything in this space. And that if we don't do that, they'll suddenly think, oh, okay, then they won't trust us. For me, I think one of the difficult parts of that is simply that when we do have these conversations, because we don't have very much experience about it, it can be very difficult to start this conversation and have these conversations in any effective way, simply because we don't have the practice as business people to doing it. So are there any features of conversation, questions or ways that people can approach just the first, say the first time they're going to have this kind of conversation with a client? What tips would you give them? What questions might you suggest they ask?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is be prepared. Write your questions beforehand and understand what you want to get out of it and what you want them to feel. So again, it's about intentionality and feel an emotion, and what do you want your customers to feel at the end of this process? And when you're asking them the questions, what do you want them to get out of it? What do you want to get out of it? So think about what you want to get out of the process. And then off the back of that, I think, it does depend on what you want. But if it's an overall thing, I think it's going in with kind of questions that are obvious that the clients, it's about the clients. It's not just about feedback for you. So, my first question is always, how's everything going? Really obvious, really straightforward. And then they just go, wah, and half of it comes out there, which is great. And then I might ask, we're really interested in finding out what your challenges are at the moment. This is what's going on at the moment. What are your challenges or the opportunities? How do you see COVID or whatever, Brexit, affecting your business? Because the business want to understand how they might be able to help you better and serve you better for the future, because obviously things are changing. So it's about understanding what they might be thinking. And then I also always say every question I'm asking for any room for improvement. So I do ask that more directly, usually kind of in the middle, is there anything we can do to improve? But it's also asking things like, so when you're asking about feedback, it might be, what's our communication like? How do you find the engagement with the team? Or are we meeting expectations? That's a really interesting question. That sort of question, I do a scoring, so 1 to 10. So you can start getting a bit of a quantitative report out of that. But the majority of it is qualitative. And of course, how likely would you be to recommend us, that sort of thing, which is what the most common one is, and everyone sends it out electronically. Great, but actually it's really hard to ask questions just on electronically, because you don't get any sense of emotion out of it. And quite often when I speak to people, they'll say, oh, I never give a 10, they're really good, but or you get people who they say, well, because of one screw up, I'm going to score them low, but the rest of the work is fine. And actually, you're never going to get that feeling unless you've spoken to them. And so then when I'm feeding back to my clients, I'm like, they really like you, but you had an issue last month, and so they've scored you a 6, when actually my sense is actually they respect you and you need to address that problem.
I think that's it. And if you leave those things unaddressed, they kind of do fester, and they can that 6 will become permanent and will go downwards. Until it's addressed. And I think that being able to turn towards what's difficult in the situation, as well as an accepting that there's good stuff going on and accepting that it's not perfect.
Yes.
Is absolutely a really, really important part of this for how we relate to this and how we relate to our clients as well, and not having to be perfect, not having to appear perfect.
Yes. And if you are human with your clients and you tell them the truth and you have that level of trust and likability, you can get away with a lot more. Because you might be having a really crap time. Someone might have deserted your business and you really need them. If you have a good relationship with that person, you can say, look, John's just left. He's had a nervous breakdown, whatever it is. Give us some slack, and then on the communication front, the importance of getting back to clients fast, even if it's to say, I've got your email. I'm up to here with millions of things. I'll get back to you tomorrow, or I'll get back to you in 3 days. Get back to them within the time you say. Don't just leave it for 3 days until you can get back to it. Make sure you communicate promptly. And again, that's one of the things that irritates clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
absolutely.
Yeah,
no, great. Okay. So I think we're kind of coming to the end of the hour now. That was a really helpful, really interesting conversation for me. And what I'd like to know is how can people take this forward? Where can they move? So say someone's been interested in what you've said. We've spoken a little bit about how you can try it out yourself. Where could you find out more, get some support in this?
Well, obviously, if anyone has any questions, they want to talk to me further about client advocacy and how to build those relationships, I'm happy to chat to anyone. I'm my website is brilliantandhuman.com. So there's more there, or you can always find me on LinkedIn. So Remeny Armitage. And I'm also running with my business partner roundtable on building better client relationships and client services, and from two different perspectives. So my perspective is the outside and the client's feedback, and then Jelaine, my partner, she looks at the inside, and she looks at how teams can actually work better with their clients in a more direct way. So it's hitting it in both angles. And so we're having a roundtable discussion. We have it in 2 weeks, but it filled up within 24 hours. So we're currently looking at another date in December, if not January. So if anyone's interested, let me know, and I will give you more information about that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm happy to chat. It's what I do.
Indeed, it's all about conversations.
Yes, exactly. So thank you.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. So I hope that's raised some thoughts for you, and maybe shifted some stuff, maybe challenged a little bit for you. If it has, then please do ask questions, get in touch, leave comments, talk to Remeny, and consider that roundtable event, which sounds really interesting. Our next episode, which is coming up next week, is on the assumption, we'll be exploring the assumption love has no place in business, which I think is an interesting follow-up based on the conversation we've just had. There's something really aligned in these two, which is rather lovely. I'll be talking to Alan Wick, who is a business coach and entrepreneur with a really exciting kind of rock and roll background. But we'll talk about more of that next week. That will be on Thursday the 19th at 5 p.m. UK time. So yeah, do sign up for that. It's already on YouTube, and the event's already on LinkedIn. So see if you want a reminder, do sign up for it so you get reminded. Then yeah, it would be great to see you there. If you've enjoyed this and it's been interesting for you, please do share it with someone. But I would really appreciate, rather than just sharing it out, share how you felt about it. Share what it made you think a little bit. And if that only means you share it with one person, then that's absolutely perfect. And if it's raised questions for you, then please do ask those questions to other people and talk about this, because this isn't fixed. We're not telling you this is how it is. We want you to explore exactly what you believe around this too. Thank you very much, Remeny, for joining me. That was a really wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really interesting. It was fun.
Super. Thank you. And thank you very much for watching. And I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.